Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Ms. Skama. Every American has been paying the price at the pump for this administration's anti-American energy policies that they have. And keep in mind, and I think it was said very well by Senator Capito in her statement, that when Biden first took office, the price of gas was $2.38. It's now at a record high. We hear record high all the time, but in this case, you can document that. The record high prior to today was $4.14, and now it's $4.25. So it's these policies that are responsible for this. And this administration has imposed policies that restrict domestic oil and gas production, including canceling the Keystone XL pipeline, and also putting the pauses as he has on the oil and gas leasing permits on federal land. So that's been going on, and that's very intentional, and that's what we're talking about right now. But Ms. Skama, do you believe that President Biden's energy agenda has contributed to the major reduction in the domestic oil and gas supply?
I do. His policies on a number of levels have been meant to stymie the American oil and gas producer and to buttress up the oil dictators around the world, like in Russia. So if we talk about not wanting to be dependent on dictators, I think the president has a lot to do with that. He could back off some of the policies that make production difficult in the United States. And I'd like to answer that absolutely incorrect statement that the American production has nothing to do with the price of oil globally, because when we were able to export oil after 2015, the American producer met the increased demand globally, and we helped to keep the global price of oil down. We are the major oil producer in the world. So, of course, the statement that our production does not affect prices is completely incorrect.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And what could the president do? What could President Biden do today that would set in motion the more domestic oil and gas production and bring relief to the American people at the pump? This is something that everyone's concerned about. You can't turn on a show without people complaining about this, and it's so obvious where it's coming from. But just today, what could we do?
Well, I think backing off on regulation like the SEC rules on climate change disclosure, which are specifically meant to get to an answer of no on any new fossil fuel projects by elevating climate change concerns over real pocketbook issues, over real production in the United States. Because, of course, when we don't produce it here, it doesn't mean we don't use it. It just means we import it from overseas.
Import it from overseas. Would you expect...
And blocking pipelines, too, is a major problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, you expect a tax then on methane to lead to the increase in energy prices. You would expect that, wouldn't you?
Right. The estimates are that about $9 billion of cost to the economy would result from the methane tax, because it's really basically a tax on natural gas. And that could be as much as $85 to $240 per consumer. So, taxing methane is meant to get less natural gas. And natural gas is used for electricity generation, to heat homes. Natural gas backs up renewables, which are intermittent. The cost of renewables is higher because they have to have that backup when they can only operate 20 to 30% of the time.
That's right. And Mr. Matheson, America is dependent on countries like China, not only for the list of critical minerals, but China controls the mining and processing for a variety of metals in the electricity sector and used in electric vehicles. Now, whether on the critical list or not, mandates on to decarbonize the transportation and electricity sectors would increase our reliance on China. I think we all understand that. And as is pointed out by the chairman in his opening remarks, I have chaired the Senate Armed Services Committee. I am concerned about national security in a more profound way than I ever have been before, because we know what China's doing. We know that back in the old days, we used to talk about how America has the best of everything, and we did for a long period of time. That's not true anymore. And so that's a very serious thing. Mr. Matheson, how can the utility sector work to ensure domestic sourcing for American mined minerals?
Well, first of all, since I mentioned in my opening statement, since rural electric cooperatives serve 56% of the land mass in this country, we serve most of the areas where we would be trying to secure these materials in terms of mining. So increased domestic production across the board for the various products you're talking about. Electric co-ops are in those areas. We would be serving those mines with electric service, and it's an area that we would value, of course, because it's part of the economic opportunity for rural communities. And since we're owned by the communities we serve, we're always interested in those economic opportunities. But I don't want to diminish what you raised in terms of national security issues. Greater domestic supply gives us greater opportunity to control the situation. I mentioned earlier to Senator Capito, the supply chain challenges we're facing in the electric sector are much more pronounced for the electric utilities that are more reliant on foreign supply. A number of our co-ops have domestic supply manufacturing relationships, and they still face supply chain challenges, but they're not as severe. So there's no question that if we can find production of these minerals or anything else in the supply chain for electric cooperatives, a domestic source is preferable.
Yeah. Well, that's so obvious to most people.
Senator Inhofe.
Sometimes have a difficult time explaining why that's not the case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. I have two unanimous consent requests. One to place a resources for the future study that shows consumers will not be harmed by the methane emission reduction program. A second, a unanimous consent request to place some materials on the economic impact of wasted energy from methane leakage into the record. If there's no objection, I'll just note for the record that we've been developing on a bipartisan basis something called the methane emission reduction program. And before any oil and gas companies required to pay a fee, they would be offered assistance up to like $750 million of money would be set aside to help pay down the costs for actions taken by oil and gas companies to reduce emissions before any fees would kick in. So there you go. All right.